So imperialism in China was very, very, very different from imperialism in India, even though it still included that same British guy with the same clothing and the same suit. And unfortunately, the producers in India really didn't give the British some of the things that they needed, like, porcelain and Chinese tea, as well as silk. So let's just say that the British had to, well, improvise. So the East India Trading Company did something that they probably wouldn't have expected to do. And that was get tea from the Native Americans that just got thrown in the ocean. Splash! No, just kidding. They decided to take themselves all the way east of India to a place called China. And when they got to China, let's just say they had mediocre success. Especially because the currency in China was mostly silver and the British lacked a lot of silver. So they were like, hey China, you want some gold? And then China was like, nah, silly. We don't take that currency, we only use silver. So then the British are like, damn it, sad face. So they decided to go all the way back to India to get a plant called the poppy, which helped them produce a resource called opium. Now, the British people thought carefully, and they were like, well, if we give them opium, maybe they'll feel so good that the Chinese people will give us what we want. So instead of saying, here, take this gold, they were like, here, take this opium. It's good for you, smiley face. And the Chinese people were like, oh, thank you, mister. And the British people were like, heck yeah. In the next 40 years for the Chinese, they set up a lot of opium houses where the Chinese people just smoked themselves silly and got really lazy. This caused a war in China called the Opium Wars because the Chinese were mad that the British sold them opium and got their people to become really, really lazy. Well, the British ended up winning this war and they eventually gained control of the island of Hong Kong, which allowed them to gain trade out of that area. But that caused China to just say, you can only export out of Hong Kong, and Great Britain owning a lot of the world was just like, cool story, bro. Eventually, a few years later, a war called the Boxer Rebellion started. It had nothing to do with boxers, but the Chinese people were called that by foreigners, and they got the snot punched out of them. Oh yeah, and they drive on the other side of the road in Hong Kong because they're a British territory!